My name is Evelyn Carter. If you had asked anyone on my block in Cincinnati who I was, they'd have said, Evie, the bus driver who remembers your kids' birthdays and slips extra cupcakes at the church bake sale? I was the woman who could be counted on. I liked belonging to a street where Mrs. Lynn watered petunias at dawn, where Leon raked the same maple leaves twice just to talk, and where my porch light was a lighthouse for anyone who couldn't find the harbor. At 6:12 on a gray Tuesday morning, my phone lit the kitchen in cold blue. The message read, "Mom, quick thing, can you spot us $7,800 just till Friday? Card processor froze our payouts. We'll wire it right back, promise." It was signed with a heart and my daughter's name, Ava. Coffee steamed up into my face, steady and warm. My hands weren't. I read it twice. I read the number 3 times. Then I did what I always did. I pictured her at her kitchen counter. Ava, the girl who once colored our mailbox with magic markers and cried when the rain took it away. I pictured the 2 kids, my grandchildren, Zoe with her messy bun and a camera around her neck, Micah with his teenage stoicism and secret kindness. I pictured my son-in-law, Justin, in his slim shirts and polished arguments. And because of all those pictures, I typed, "How soon do you need it?" By noon, the money was gone from my account, and if history was any guide, it was gone to somewhere I'd never sit, eat, or be invited to. But don't skip ahead. If you do, you might miss how I came to be the kind of woman who could tell herself 1,000 gentle lies and call it love. 5 years earlier, Ray died in the back bedroom of the house we bought in 1983 when the river ran higher and our hope ran wild. Ray had a laugh that shook windows and a temper that could bruise a room, but he always circled back to kindness. Leaky gutters, oil changes, Christmas Eve toy assembly. If I needed anything, he had it before I finished the sentence. He was the rhythm of my days. When the heart monitor turned quiet, so did my kitchen, my porch, my mornings, my Saturdays. Grief isn't loud the way they tell it in movies. It's the absence of clatter, the slow fade of footsteps you think you hear. The first time Ava asked for money, she didn't ask. She came with paperwork. "It's an incubator for teen entrepreneurs," she said, sliding glossy brochures across my table. "Bridge and Bloom. We've got a storefront in Walnut Hills, Mom. We just need seed money for laptops and a small build-out. We raised 20 from a grant. If you could spot 25 for 6 months, we've got a donor match pending." Justin smiled like a banker on a billboard. "Short-term bridge, Evie. We'll put it in writing." She said bridge like she knew I loved the river and the idea of things that take you somewhere. I signed because I wanted to be useful again, because my hands needed to hold something that wasn't absence, because I believed in my daughter the way I believed in my church's cracked bell. It might be chipped, but it still rang true. 6 months passed. The donor match never arrived, but the request did, neat as invoices. A cooler for snacks for the kids, a fixture for the storefront plumbing, a temporary marketing consultant, a camera for Zoe because art keeps her off her phone, Mom, a club membership for a fundraiser space just for 1 quarter, optics matter, a soccer clinic for Micah. His coach says it's essential to build confidence. The numbers were never the point. The story was. The story was always about community, about the future, about children, about promise. I drove metro routes at dawn in those days, up Vine, down Montgomery, back again, engine whispering while the city rubbed sleep from its eyes. I counted fares and faces in the minutes between green lights. When the pandemic came, the bus was a lifeline. People pressed gratitude into my palm with their eyes. I kept going because it felt like service mattered. The thing about being a person who gives is that you start thinking you're choosing it. You're generous, not desperate, faithful, not afraid, strong, not lonely. But every yes was also a way of not sitting still enough to hear how empty the house had become. The day I first felt the wrongness, it didn't come with a shout. It arrived as a whisper during the 10 p.m. news. I was renting a mug when the anchor's smile went shiny. Tonight, Cincinnati's own Bridge and Bloom honored with the Phoenix Award at the Downtown Hyatt, celebrating a program bringing entrepreneurship to underserved youth. The camera glided over a ballroom lit the color of fresh peaches, uplights gilded walls. Chairs were ghost white and elegant. A quartet poured out the kind of music that makes you stand straighter. And there, Ava, in a floor-length slate dress I had never seen, hair swept like a magazine cover. Justin, in black tie with a boutonniere that cost what my bus driver friends would call a car payment. Zoe in a satin jumpsuit. Micah in a tux with sneakers the color of money. They laughed as someone handed Ava a glass award shaped like rising flames. The chyron read, "Nonprofit Leaders Honored." The reporter said, "After a rough year, Bridge and Bloom found a way to keep going. Tonight is about resilience." The camera cut to a bar heavy with bottles. It swung wide to a sponsor wall, Redwood Capital, Prospect Bank, a real estate firm I knew could buy this neighborhood twice. I stood with my hands wet over the sink and felt a quiet, steady shift, like a tide moving under the surface before you notice the shore is different. My mind tried to be kind. Maybe the tickets were donated. Maybe the lender cut a deal. Maybe I should call. But the phone sat face down on the counter, and I didn't. I watched my daughter accept an award for resilience while my bank balance did too. The next morning, my route was late because a school crossing guard waved kids by like a magician. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Ava, bright and breathless. "Hey, Mom, yesterday was insane. We won this little recognition. Press is silly. Anyway, nothing major. How are you? Oh, small hiccup. The bank is dragging its feet on releasing our deposits because of the surge in donations, which is wild, right? Can you front us just through the week, $700-800? I'll swing by the night." She arrived with a store-bought pie and a hug and that practiced look of, "We've got it handled." I wrote the check. We talked about Zoe's photography scholarship dreams and Micah's defense stats. We did not talk about the Hyatt. When you live long enough, you collect doors you didn't open when you should have. All those closed doors are the architecture of regret. The next small rupture came disguised as efficiency. Justin texted, "Evie, we can streamline reimbursements if I add you as a backup on the business card. Purely procedural. No charges ever hit you. It's just in case the processor flags anything. I'll send DocuSign." I pressed my thumb on the screen and made things easier for everyone but me. I'd like to tell you I was naive, but I wasn't. I was practiced at pretending. A week later, Leon, the neighbor who rakes leaves twice, knocked with his old iPad under his arm. "Evie, you seen this?" He turned the screen toward me. It was the society page nobody reads until their neighbor appears on it. A slideshow of faces from the Phoenix Award. There was a caption under Ava's photo. Founder of Bridge in Bloom, scaling from 1 to 3 locations this fall. The sentence sat like a dare. Leon said gently, "You good?" I said, "Sure," because he was asking about my heart, and the true answer would have flooded the porch. He nodded like men do when they know not to push a woman not ready to be caught. I didn't sleep that night. I opened the drawer where I keep warranties, rubber bands, and old birthday cards, and pulled out a yellow legal pad. I wrote every amount I could remember, every just until Friday, every bridge. I flipped through bank statements until the numbers started to sound like a language I didn't want to speak. $25,000 for the build-out, $9,000 for a water-damaged wall, $2,000 for Zoe's camera, $1,800 for Micah's clinic, $400 for a fundraiser table decoration fee, $1,200 for interim consultant, $700-800 for the processor freeze, $350 here, $89 there. The legal pad filled with small kindnesses that had turned into a map of my own avoidance. When I finished, the number at the bottom was $71,940. I stared at it so long, the 7 looked like a skive, and the 9 like a question mark. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is a hot, clean fire. This was a cold kind of noticing. The kind you do when you find a bruise and know exactly how you got it. The next morning, I did something my daughter would have called dramatic, and I would later call adult. I took the half day from my route and drove my own car downtown, found a meter 2 blocks from the bank, and walked in like a woman who decided not to be convenient anymore. "Hi," I said to a young woman in a navy blazer and perfect eyeliner. "I need to remove myself as a backup on a business card I never should have been on and freeze any new credit in my name." Her name tag said C. Martinez. She smiled, not the fake way, the I see you way. She said, "We can do that. We can do all of that." She asked for ID, a signature, 2 extra signatures just in case, and a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Do you want to set text alerts for any attempted charges?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and it felt like saying yes to myself. On the curb outside, I called my credit union and asked to close a rainy day account Justin had convinced me to link for liquidity. The woman on the phone said, "Miss Carter, we can close it today." I said, "It's been raining for years, honey." And she laughed the kind of laugh that turns strangers into accomplices. I almost wanted to send a group text. New rules, new me. But I knew better than to warn people who only listen when you're on fire. 2 hours later, the phone lit again. "Mom, emergency. Processor didn't release. Payroll tomorrow. We need 8. I'll bring papers to sign if you're more comfortable. Love you." It was the extra if that did it for me. The stutter where confidence should have been. I typed 4 words, and if I had known how they would change the map of my life, I would have written them on my bathroom mirror first to practice not shaking. Ask your other investors. I didn't add a period. I didn't add a heart. I didn't add sweetie or baby or any of the soft rap mothers use to keep their daughters from hearing the sharp edge. I put my phone face down and made a sandwich with too much mustard. Calls came in now like a storm that forgot what drizzle was. I let them go to voicemail. The first set were reasonable. Mom, this is a miscommunication. Then the second set grew small teeth. Evie, we're family. Third set, the tone you use with a stubborn refund department. It's irresponsible to make a party when kids are involved. I didn't answer. Every silence was a plank in the bridge I was building back to myself. At 3 o'clock, a number I didn't recognize rang. I answered because I was a fool for new beginnings. Miss Carter, this is Prospect Bank Fraud Prevention. Are you authorizing an additional card for Bridge and Bloom on your line? The word fraud was like a key turning. No, I said, I am not. The man asked for a phrase to freeze the account. I said the first thing that came to mind. No is a full sentence. He chuckled, and the chuckle made me laugh too, until it turned into something else. It took 22 minutes after that for Justin to show up on my porch. He arrived as if he had purchased the air on the way over and intended to lease it back to me. He wore that smile men wear when they believe charm is a universal solvent. Evie, he began, this is a misunderstanding. Bridge and Bloom is scaling. Cash flow is always... I held up my hand because I had given that gesture to 1,000 rowdy teenagers on my bus, and it always worked. Justin, I said, I took my name off your card. The account is yours to manage, not mine to backstop. He glanced past me into my hallway like the money might be stacked there in mason jars. We're on the cusp, Evie. These things require runway. Ava hates asking you, but... I stepped onto the porch. I closed the door behind me so he couldn't treat my hallway like a hostage. I have given you runway for 5 years, I said. At some point, it's not runway. It's a landing strip for a plane I'm not on. He tried to look wounded. The expression didn't fit him. You'd let your grandchildren's program fail? He asked. The question was mean because it was almost honest. I won't let my daughter use me as a line item any longer. If your program depends on me being irresponsible, your program is irresponsible. His face moved through a few options and landed on stone. You're making a mistake. Donors will hear about this. He said it like a threat and thought he was saying it like a fact. They might. And they might ask why your donors are sleeping under my roof. 2 hours later, Ava knocked. She didn't ring the bell. She knew I hated the bell. She stood on the porch in jeans and a sweatshirt that said, "Dream Big" in block letters, and looked like the girl who once begged for a kitten I was allergic to. This was the problem. Mother's eyes see then and now at once. "Mom," she said, "can we talk?" I didn't make her ask twice. I opened the door wide so the porch didn't think it had to keep our secrets. "I'm angry," she said, without any of the softeners. The honesty made my own anger less lonely. "I know," I said. "You blindsided us," she said. "We were counting on you." The sentence rang in the room like silverware scraped on dry china. "That," I said, "is the part we need to talk about, the counting." She glanced at the legal pad on the table, still open, numbers like ants marching in thoughtful lines. "Did you make a ledger, Mom?" She said ledger as if it were a betrayal. I thought about the ledgers in every church basement, every bake sale, every small town that ever had to survive on 3 good plans and a lot of casseroles. I did, I said, and it turns out I've been better at math than at boundaries. She folded her arms across her chest like she was protecting herself from a wind. We would have paid you back, she said, and the sentence was so thin it broke as it left her mouth. You would have tried, I said, but you didn't. And every time I didn't ask, you believed I was fine with that. The room went quiet, in that way rooms do when both people are measuring the cost of what comes next. I saw the gala, I said. I told her about the anchor and the peaches and the award with the flame. She flushed. Mom, they gave us comp tickets. Comp, the word is small and feels slippery. I let it pass and reached for the bigger thing. You didn't tell me. Not about the prize, not about the plan to scale, not about the new lease I see you signed, because the real estate site posts them like gossip. She sat down without asking. That felt like a victory I didn't want. I didn't tell you because, she began and then stopped. Because I knew you'd say no, and because I was afraid of the day you'd start saying it. I leaned forward so my elbows rested on my knees the way I saw counselors do in the break room where bus drivers were sent to recalibrate. Ava, I said, I'm sorry I trained you to think my love looks like a check. That's the part that's on me. I was lonely and helping you felt like purpose, but I won't do it anymore. She looked smaller than at the Hyatt. Smaller than on the society page, smaller than on the brochures where she stood next to kids holding T-shirts that said CEO in marker. What am I supposed to do? She asked. The sentence sounded like it was coming from a much younger room. Run your thing the way anyone runs anything. Raise money, cut costs, be honest with donors, pay for what you can, tell the truth. She laughed then, a small, ugly noise that was part despair, part defense. You make it sound simple. I make it sound like work. When she left, she hugged me the way you hug a fence before you decide whether to climb it or go home. I hugged her back, exactly the amount of fence hugs. It would be cleaner for the story to tell you I slept like a girl that night. I didn't. I lay awake and floated between relief and a heavy sort of fear. I thought of Zoe's camera and Micah's clinic and the teenagers whose names I knew because Ava did build something real in between the balloons and the unbelievable asks. I thought about whether I had cut a rope or a lifeline. In the morning, Leon knocked with coffee. He didn't ask. He handed me a cup the way people hand you a life preserver and say, "Don't argue." "You did it," he said. I nodded and said, "I don't know if I did the right it." He sat without being invited because that's what friends do when you forget manners because you're drowning. "Right and easy aren't cousins," he said. They barely nod at each other in public. The thing about saying no is that it's contagious. You say it once, and suddenly you hear yourself saying it to everything that was slowly taking you. Not in robberies, but in withdrawals. I said no to taking a shift that made my knees ache. I said no to church committees that needed my worry more than my wisdom. I said yes to my porch being just a porch and not an extension office for everybody else's emergencies. I said yes to my own damn sandwich. If you're listening from Phoenix or Philly or Portland, you probably understand that weather isn't just outside, it's in houses. The forecast changed in mine. The air felt less stolen. 2 days later, the credit union pushed an alert to my phone. Attempted charge $1,032.17 at Prospect Gala Rentals declined. I looked at it the way you look at a mosquito you just slapped, small and satisfying. Another ping. Attempted charge $487.60 declined. I smiled like a petty god. Then a message I didn't expect lit my screen. "Grandma, it's Zoe. Can I call you? I'm in the parking lot at school. Mom is mad at everyone. I just want to hear you say hi." I typed back, "Hi, baby. I'm here." We didn't talk about money. We talked about light. She told me she'd found a window in the old school building where the afternoon sun made chalk dust look like snow. She took a photo of it and thought, "This is how people pretend they know how to pray," she said. I felt something in my chest make a sound I hadn't heard in a while. "You've got your granddad's eye," I told her. "He could make a bent nail look like a hymn." "Are you mad at Mom?" she asked 8 minutes later. "I'm careful," I said. "I'm protecting my roof and my ribs." She was quiet the way the river is before it decides which way to turn. "I think that's smart," she said. There's a chapter of the story where I leave town, and you might think it's a cliche. It wasn't. It was a prescription. 3 weeks after the gala, after the texts, after the porch, after the legal pad became a fence, I walked into a community center that smelled like chlorine and floor wax and asked the woman at the desk about a senior trip brochure taped crookedly to a bulletin board. She said, "We've got a Southwest tour, Santa Fe, Taos, a day at White Sands, then a night sky program near Flagstaff, 10 days. It's not Rome," she joked, "but it might be better," I said. "I need to stand under a sky that doesn't care about ledgers." I booked it with my own card and then stood in the parking lot and cried because I had finally used my money on a thing that would open me, not drain me. The day I left, Leon drove me to the bus pickup because he said airport goodbyes were from movies and our people take buses to the horizon. He lifted my suitcase like it was lighter than the small boulder I had been rolling up a hill for 5 years. "Bring me back a rock," he said. "Bring me back all your breath," I said. Santa Fe smells like pinon smoke and something like forgiveness. The first morning there, I walked Canyon Road and pretended I could afford what I was seeing. Galleries were full of colors like arguments resolved. A woman about my age with hair whiter than my church lilies sat sketching the doorway. "You're going to draw the whole town at this pace," I said. She looked up and smiled. "The town changes slower than I do," she said. Her name was Anita. She had 3 children who lived on 3 coasts and sent her links to articles about balance. "Balance is a myth," she said later over soup. "There's only attention. What you give it to grows." That night, the group drove out to a place where the road gives up and hands the duty to dust. We parked where the sky begins in earnest. The guide told us to let our eyes adjust. "There are more stars than your disbelief," he said, and he wasn't wrong. I lay on a blanket under a ceiling no architect could have planned. The Milky Way spilled like someone had been careless with diamonds. I tried to count like the legal pad taught me, but counting felt like an insult here. I whispered Ray's name. It drifted up gentle and faded the way a good man does through time. I said my own name out loud, Evelyn. I wanted to hear what it sounded like when no one was asking me to be anything but that. On day 5, we stopped in a town where a woman made turquoise bracelets in a stall that looked more honest than any office I had signed anything in lately. I bought one not because I needed turquoise, but because I wanted a circle that reminded me circles can be made, not just fallen into. At White Sands, the dunes were so clean they looked like a rumor. I took off my shoes and let my feet disappear. A little boy screamed with joy every time he rolled down a hill the way joy screams when it needs to be heard. His mother laughed the way I hadn't in months. I wrote in a small spiral notebook I've been carrying since the night of the legal pad. I am nobody's safety net at the cost of my own bone. I am a woman who takes buses to skies. I am done apologizing for keeping the lights on here. I will not be generous with people who are stingy with truth. On the 8th day, Anita asked if I wanted coffee, and I said yes, the way people of a certain age say yes, slow and full, because we know there might not be 1,000 more. She told me she once co-signed a loan for her son. It looked good on paper, she said, but paper is where dreams go to pretend they're instructions. We laugh like women who have done their share of cleaning up after men and kids and everybody else. When we parted, she hugged me the way dancers do after a routine that nearly took them. Checked, firm, grateful. On the 10th day, when the bus crossed a state line that didn't feel like a line at all, my phone, which I had kept on airplane mode as if it were fasting, shivered awake in my bag. Messages flew in like starlings startled from a wire. I didn't read them on the bus. I waited until my room had a table, a chair, a glass of tap water that tasted like a tap and not a plan. I scrolled past subject lines that read urgent and please read and final notice. I paused on one from a name I hadn't saved, J. Tate. I opened it. It was not what I expected. It was a PDF of a formal letter and a scan of a check for $3,000 with the memo first payment. The letter said, Evie, I don't know how to start. I have built spreadsheets in my life, not apologies. They are different skills. I used your generosity as a buffer because I didn't want to face the math of our choices. When you pull the buffer, the numbers hurt. We deserve the bruise. We're restructuring. We sold a car I loved more than it loved me. We let a lease go. We cut a fundraiser we couldn't afford to make. We're telling donors the truth. They don't love it, but the ones who stay are the ones we should have had from the start. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I am sending money. We will send more each month until the ledger stops looking like a mirror I don't want to face. I know I have been a lousy steward of your trust. I'm trying to be a better steward of my own integrity. Justin. I set the phone down. I didn't cry. I am not a woman who cries for PDFs. But I did feel a shift. A small one, like when a train switches tracks so smoothly you only know because the view changes a little. Another message. This one from Ava. It wasn't long. It read, Mom, I am embarrassed. I am angry at myself in ways that make me want to blame you because that's easier than walking past mirrors. We got caught up in optics. We built a brand, not a spine. We are in therapy, couples and individual. I hate saying that because it feels like admitting I broke something everyone could see. But hiding hasn't worked. Zoe called you, I know. Thank you for answering. Micah is quiet, but he hears everything. If you don't want to talk to me right now, I get it. If you do, I'll come over with nothing to ask for but time and a chair at your table. A. I read it 3 times. It was not a poem, but it wasn't a pitch. On the flight home, a small plane that shook like a washing machine, I looked out at clouds that looked like every cheap metaphor and thought, I don't owe anyone my peace to prove I'm kind. I don't owe an argument to prove I'm right. I owe myself a life that doesn't resent the people I love. Leon was at the curb when the bus door hissed open back in Cincinnati. He used his hand like a blink to shield his eyes from a sun that had gotten stronger since I left. You bring me a rock? He asked. I pulled a small white stone from my pocket, the kind that knows 1,000,000 feet better than a single pedestal. I bring you a sky, I said, and pointed up. He laughed and said, that'll do. At home, there was a padded envelope on my front step with no return address, just my name written like the person knew my handwriting better than their own. Inside, there was a letter on Bridge and Bloom letterhead, a personal check, and this startled me more than anything. A stack of photocopied receipts, highlighter slashes, and a neat table drawn in pen with columns labeled date, amount, why, and status. It was Ava's ledger. The letter said, Mom, here is how I plan to repay you. I know plans don't make the present easier, but I need you to see that I have a plan that isn't just words. First payment enclosed. Monthly on the 1st. We downsized. I'm learning to be bored with the truth without decorating it. I love you. A. I put the check in a drawer, not because I didn't need it or because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I didn't want to move too fast and confuse an action with a transformation. I made myself a promise. I would cash the 3rd one, not the 1st, not the 2nd. I would look for pattern, not performance. The next weeks were quiet in a way I had forgotten how to trust. Nobody knocked with the crisis that had my name pre-printed on it. My porch light was just a light. I took my bus assignment back for 2 mornings a week because I missed the rhythm but refused to be owned by it. I let my knees rest the other mornings. I joined a ceramics class at a rec center where the clay smelled like the river when it's about to say something. My bowls looked like earnest attempts at bowls. Anita from Santa Fe sent me a postcard with a sketch of a doorway. She wrote, "Attention is the only currency that inflates the right way." Zoe came over on a Saturday with coffee from the shop that sells foam that looks like roses. She brought her camera but didn't take it out of the bag. "I want to listen today," she said. We sat at the table where I once signed away quiet and promised to treat it like a guest we wanted to stay. She told me about a professor who said composition is just deciding what the story is and making sure everything else holds it. "I think that's life too," she said, deciding what the story is. I nodded like a student happy to be in class. 2 months in, the 3rd envelope arrived, the 3rd check, and I took it to the bank wearing the bracelet from the turquoise stall. C. Martinez was at the window. She recognized me with that same "I see you" smile. "Deposit?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and thank you for the day you gave me my name back." I didn't stop loving my daughter. That isn't how love works. It isn't an account you close when someone overdrafts it. It's a house you excise mold from so it doesn't choke you. You keep the beams, you open the windows, you say "not like this" and hope it's heard. The next conversation with Ava took place at my table with no papers between us. She told me about a donor who asked, "What's different now?" and how she said "me." She told me about a kid named Jay who sold t-shirts with the word honest on them and how he asked, "Is that corny?" And she said, "Only if you don't mean it." We laughed at the way truth sometimes feels like a cliche until you try it and realize it's rare. We didn't touch the ledger. We touched the part of our lives that ledger can't measure. 3 seasons turned. The maple in Leon's yard did what it always does. Zoe got a photo in a student show and acted like it mattered just enough and not too much. Micah told me a joke so flat in delivery I didn't know to laugh until he smirked. I kept making bowls that would hold soup and not metaphors. On a Sunday evening, colored like sweet tea, there was a knock I knew before I answered it. Justin stood there with his jaw unclenched and his hair not quite like a billboard. "Evie," he said, "I wanted to say thank you for freezing the card." I looked around to make sure my porch hadn't become a sketch comedy show. "Freezing the card saved us," he said. "We were burning a hole through your floor and calling it a fireplace." It was the first time he had said a sentence that made me want to laugh and not at once. "Make sure you install a proper chimney," I said. And that was how we forgave each other without using the word. Time did its stubborn work. 6 months became a year, became 2. The ledger went from $71,940 to a number that didn't pinch when I thought of it. I could have counted faster if I'd asked, or if they'd rushed, but I didn't want fast. I wanted solid. Ava's program got smaller and got better. They stopped renting ballrooms and started renting folding chairs and left the lights on in rooms people actually used. They learned that scale sounds like success until you admit you climbed a ladder leaning on the wrong wall. I took another trip. Not to Italy, to a state park 2 hours away where the trails are narrower than your loneliness and the creek says the same thing over and over until you finally hear it. I went with Anita and 2 women from my ceramics class. We ate sandwiches like they were prayers and talked about everything except the things we weren't ready to name. That's friendship at this age, the gift of not being demanded from. If you're still here, if you didn't click away when the gala lights glittered or the dunes turned into a postcard, maybe you need to hear me say this the way I needed to hear Anita say balance is a myth. You don't have to mortgage your spine to be someone's mother, sister, grandmother, partner, friend. You can love loud without opening your bank or your boundaries like a door with a broken latch. You can say no and not become the villain of your own life story. I used to think I lost $71,940. That legal pad number glowed like an accusation while I fell asleep. The truth is, I bought something. I bought my porch back. I bought mornings where coffee tastes like coffee and not like bargaining. I bought a trip to a sky where my name sounded like the first note of a song I'd forgotten I knew. I bought the right to hug my daughter without counting the cost of the embrace. I bought, this is the part I want you to write down if you take notes like I do, the right to be generous on purpose instead of by reflex. If you're listening from Cincinnati, say hey in the comments. If you're in Cleveland or Charlotte or Cheyenne, tell me what your sky looked like today. And if any part of this story felt like someone finally turned on the light in a room you've been tiptoeing through for years, then maybe tonight you'll sit at your own table with a legal pad or a spiral notebook or the back of an envelope and write down the ways you've been bought with your own soft answers. Then write 4 words that will hand you your name back. They'll be your words, not mine. Mine were ask your other investors. Yours might be use your own card, or not anymore, not here, or simple as no is enough. I'll read what you choose to share, and I'll be over here making bowls that hold something warm, wearing a bracelet that reminds me of circles done right, and watching a porch light that means what it says, home from me, welcome for you, without a price tag hanging from the lamp. There's a photo on my mantle now. It's not from a gala. It's not framed in gold. Zoe took it on a day when the sun hit the dust in my kitchen just so, and the particles turned to confetti in the beam. In the photo, my hands are wrapped around a cup, and there's a smile in the corner of my mouth that you can miss if you weren't paying attention. It is the look of a woman who no longer breathes like someone else is borrowing her lungs. If you stayed to the end, thank you. Tell me where you're listening from, and tell me one thing you're keeping for yourself this year. If you want more stories like this about people my age who are just starting to get good at being alive, stick around. I've got a bus route's worth of them, and you've got a seat.